In my last video, I was showing how I could access any of my video memory, set the appropriate register on the video card to choose the appropriate 64K segment, and locate the appropriate address within that memory, all based off of an XY screen position. One of the things I was doing in my routines is to pass parameters in based on a memory address. And that is one way that you can get parameters into a procedure, is by setting some global memory and letting that procedure read it. Two other ways to do it would be to pass in information through a register, the A, B, C, D register as examples. And a third way would be to leverage the stack. And I had a couple of quick comments on please don't use the memory addresses to pass in parameters. And I think that is good advice and proper advice. And so I thought I would come back and just real quickly revisit some changes I'm making to my code to address that concern or take that set of suggestions into account here. So maybe I'll just start with showing an example of previous code. And so I had shared this VGA draw pixel, and the way this works is I basically call a procedure, the set segment from XY, but before I would call this draw pixel, I would fill in an address, a variable with VGA param X, VGA param Y, and the color. So where do I want the pixel, X, Y, and what color? But that was just pointing to addresses in memory that really any of my code could access. And then that would come in, and then I would call these other procedures, and they would go look at these other pieces of memory that again had the X, the Y, the color already stored before I had called the draw pixel. So that's probably the worst way to do it of those three options I mentioned. So I either can use memory addresses, or I can use registers, or I can use the stack. What I've decided to do is, if I can pass via registers, in other words, I don't have a lot of information to pass into a routine, I'll do that. But if I have more data to pass into a routine, then I really have registers. So if I have, for example, 10 bytes of data, I really am not going to find passing by registers is going to be the easiest there. I might instead use the stack. So I'm going to use a combination of those two approaches, using registers and using the stack to pass parameters into my different routines. So I've updated this VGA draw pixel, and here is now what I've updated that with. So in this case, I need three parameters for this draw pixel. I need that X position, Y position, and a color. And I decided to try this one out on the stack. And so if I'm going to call this VGA draw pixel, right before I call it, I need to push onto the stack my X, and then I need to push on my Y, and then I need to push on my color. And so I'll do three pushes. I'll make the call to VGA draw pixel, and then within this, the first thing I do is I save the base pointer. I update the base pointer to my current stack pointer, and then I can do whatever I need in the routine to push my other things that I want to save and restore down here. But then when it comes into actually getting my Y location, I can just say go to the base pointer plus 6, or if I need the X parameter, it's base pointer plus 8, or if I need the color, it's base pointer plus 4. And I put this little reminder up here for me is when I do make this move BPSP, basically my old base pointer is BP, my return address is BP plus 2, color is plus 4, Y is plus 6, X is plus 8. Basically, the last thing I pushed for my parameter will be the plus 4, the second to last will be plus 6, third to last will be plus 8, etc. So now I can just read those values off of the stack and pull that in and use them accordingly. So within here now, for me to call VGA set segment from XY, I need to pass it my Y position. So I grab the Y off the stack, I put it into a register, because that's an easy way to now pass it into set segment. And I call that. Now for me to do get pixel mem address, I need to give it both my X and Y. Well, I've already got my Y position inside of DX, so then I just fill in BX with my X position, and now this procedure can access both y and x coordinates through dx and bx. And then when I get down here and I want to fill in the color actually of the pixel within my video memory, I can just grab that from this stack, this BP+4. So this is how I'm going to basically set up my routine so that I can pass in, well, pretty much as many parameters as I realistically am going to use, pushing them onto the stack. But that's a little bit of hassle, so if I don't need to do that, I definitely would rather use registers like I did down here. Set segment from XY is going to expect that the DX register is filled in with the Y coordinate. And this get pixel mem address is going to expect that Y is in DX and X is in BX. And so if I just maybe step forward for a second into that, here's this set segment from XY, and you can see there I come in, and this was my original code. Here's the updated version of it. So I have parameters. In is my Y position that I'm going to send in the DX register, and then I'm not going to return anything, so now I can just use that DX directly here, and that's working out great. And then if I get to this get the pixel memory address, I need both X and Y, and so now I'm going to expect as far as parameters, I'm going to bring in my Y position as in my DX register, my X position in my BX register, and then I'm going to return the memory address that it actually identifies based on XY position in the BX register. I suppose I could do a different register so these aren't both B in and B out. I don't know if that's a bad practice or not, but in my case here, I didn't see a reason why it would matter a whole lot. Unless I wanted to retain this BX that was passed in, then maybe I'll pass it in as CX, send out the value that I looked up with the memory address as CX, and that way I could retain what I passed in those, whatever I was filling them in with. So that's another way that I'm just using registers here on those two. Now if I get to this VGA draw rectangle, this was the old code and this is the new code. And I'm not done doing all the updates on this one, but I did enough to actually test all of this so far, that as far as what you've seen. And so previously I would call this VGA draw pixel and had previously filled in those variables of X, Y, and color. But now that I've updated this procedure for draw pixel, I need to push things onto the stack. And just to really quick test this, what I did is I just said within this procedure, just take the stuff I've got in these variables, which I will get rid of that later, but put them into C, B, and A registers just to turn around then and push them onto the stack. And so this is just temporary code up here. What you're going to see later is that I'll push on my X, I'll push on my Y value, I push on my color, and then I'll call this VGA draw pixel. And then if I step back to the VGA draw pixel, it then will receive those three parameters as part of my stack, and so now I can refer to them as BP+4 plus 6 plus 8, or reverse order. Here's my X, here's my Y, here's my color. So those are changes I made. I've tested that, and that all is working fine. So now I've just got to go through the rest of my coding wherever I've used VGA param Y as an example and clean it up. And as an example, if I go back to VGA draw rectangle, I need to update this code because I'm still temporarily using these. So I'll get rid of these. Inside of my VGA draw rectangle, I'm going to use the stack again because in this case I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different incoming parameters, and so the stack will work well for that, whereas trying to put in 5 different registers with values isn't going to work so well for me. But I'll update this to bring in, read from the stack, and then basically pass the appropriate things on to the next call through registers. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to do a combination of passing with registers if it's just 1 or 2 words of data that I'm going to send. If I need to send more than a few words, 2 or 3 words of data, then I'm going to go ahead and use the stack to pass that over. And that, like I said, is working fine. I just have to get my brain used to thinking like that so that I can push things onto the stack appropriately. And then within my routines, there's a little bit of extra work to make sure that I can save the base pointer, move the base pointer to really where my current stack pointer is, and then use things relative from there to get access to all my parameters. So I thought I'd share that. I do understand the initial way I did it was maybe a shortcut and not ideal as my code gets more complicated. So appreciate the suggestions, and just trying to show everybody here kind of the path I'll be taking. I'm sure there's still things I can improve on this, but I think this is a step better than what I had previously.